Hello there, welcome back guys, welcome back to a brand new video of my Ghost Hack YouTube channel. So guys, this is the another fourth video on GS interview playlist. So in this video, we will see what is scope. So before we move further, I would suggest please watch my previous video which I made on the hoisting. So if we understand the hoisting, then it is easy to understand the scope. Now let's see what is scope. So scope actually work in the case of variable only. Now if we see the scope definition, so scope means availability and duration of availability of variable. So simply scope means availability, which you can also say visibility of variable, and duration of visibility of variable. So JavaScript actually has the three types of scope. First is a global scope, another is a block scope, and third one is a function scope. So for global scope, it is easy. A variable declared at the top of program or outside function is considered as a global variable. Now let's see understand by this example. Let me copy this and let me paste here. Now this is the single function and the variable which I am referring here is declared on top of the program. So which means the variable which declare on top of the variable which declare outside the function is known as the global variable. So if I run this program, it will give me the hello as output. In this case, you can work with the var as well. It will also work the same. If I run this again, the same, and the same for the const as well. If I run, the same output you will get. And here is the another note. We can use the variable without declaring it. So if we use it without declaration, then the variable is automatically global. So which means if I just remove this, now I did not mention let, var and const. Now if I run this also considered as a global variable. Now if I cut from here, if I paste it here, now if I run this program, I will get the hello. So interviewer might ask you, suppose if you declare and initialize the variable like this, so is it okay or not? Is it right or not? You can simply say it will work as the same as the global variable. Now let's try to look at the block variable. What is block? So the block variable is simply means a variable declared inside this curly braces, opening curly braces and closing curly braces, which is considered as a block. So if variable is declared inside this block, then obviously it is a block scope variable and it cannot be accessed from the outside of the block. Now this is the another example. Now you can see that if I try to access this outside the block, now if I run this, you can see that I am getting error. X is not defined. Similarly for the Y also we will get the same error because it is declared inside the block. Now suppose if I declare another variable with the var keyword, now if I am trying to access this, now it is printing the 10. Now you may wonder why it's not working with the var. So var is actually not working in the case of block scope because it is comes under the ES5 features and the ES5 have the hoisting. So that's why I told you. So before watch this video, please check out the hoisting video. So you might know in which cases var will work and in which cases let and const will work. So for block scope, a variable declared inside this block is known as the block scope variable and those variable cannot be accessed outside. Now let's understand what is function scope. So a variable declared inside a function is considered as a function scope variable, and it is only accessible within the function, not outside. Now let me see. Now let me copy this. Now once I run this program, so in first case you can see it is accessible variable var, but when I try to access this variable outside of the function, it is simply provide me the output is not defined. Similar for the let and const as well, it will work the same, because for let and const it is declared under this curly braces, which means it is a block scope for them. Now let's understand the nested block scope and the nested function scope example. So let me copy this. So this is the nested block scope example. Let me minimize this. Yeah. Now let's see what happened here. This is the single if condition. Inside the if condition, I declare the const foo. Now inside of this, I just declare another if condition. Again, there is another variable, and here I am trying to access the previous one variable. Now, if you remember, as per the block scope definition, a variable which is declared inside the curly braces, which is known as the block scope variable. So which means we can access the variable inside of this curly braces anywhere. So this if condition also initialize under this block scope, under this curly braces, so we can access this here as well. Similar for this, here we are trying to access the both variable, this declaration and this one. So ultimately we will not end up with any error. We will simply get the value which is declared will printed in the console. Now suppose if I try to access this variable outside of the block scope, then obviously I will end up with the error. So foo is not defined. Similar for the bar also, we will get the same error. The bar is not defined. So this is what the example of the nested block scope. Now let's understand the example of nested function scope. Let me copy this one. Now let's try to understand this example. So this is the single function, and inside this function I just declare another function, which means nesting of function. So here in outside of the function I am simply passing one parameter, and which I am trying to access inside of the another function. So as per the definition, we will able to access this bar inside of the function as well. Now let me show you. If I use the let a equal to 10, now let's check if I am able to access the a inside this function or not, and the answer is yes, you will able to access the inside. Now the twist here is, if I try to access the a which is declared inside the function here, then obviously I will end up with the error. So this is what the scope actually means. So you may understand in JavaScript there are basically three main types of scope. First is a global scope, which is declared outside of the function and top of the program. Another is a block scope, which means a variable which declared inside the curly braces, which known as the block scope. But in the case of block scope, only let and const will work, var will not work. And why var will not work? That is simply because of the hoisting functionality. Now what is function scope? A variable which is declared inside a function, which can be accessible inside the function only, which is known as the function scope. Now let's see some of the key points we have to remember. It is a good practice to avoid the use of global variable, because the value of global variable can change in different areas. Like suppose you declare the variable top of the program, you can change that value from the inside the function. So we have to mostly avoid to use the global variable. Also, it will override some Windows variable which will introduce the unknown result of the program. So you might be asking, there are some scenario we have to use the global variable. So in that scenario, I would suggest use the const keyword. Only declare a global variable which contain the constant value. Now, if you assign a value to a variable that has not declared, it will automatically become a global variable, which means this is the example which we just saw. This is the variable without declaring we initialize this value. So which means automatically it become a global variable. Now, in JavaScript there is a strict mode in which variable cannot be used without declaring it. So interviewer might ask you if you use the strict mode, then it will provide you any error or not. Then obviously strict mode will provide you the error. Now, function argument and parameter work as a local variable inside a function, which means this is the example. Here, this is the function parameter and it will simply work as the local variable which will be accessible only inside a function only. Now, another. Before ES6 2015, JavaScript had only global scope and function scope. That is true because ES5 only have the global scope and the functional scope, and later on ES6 introduced the block scope. Now, function, local, slash block variable are deleted when the function and the block is completed, which means suppose if you declare any variable inside the function or inside the block, and when the execution will happen, the memory will allocate to that variable, and if that function and the block is ended, its work is end, then obviously those declared variable are getting deleted from the memory itself. Now, variable declared with the var keyword are hoisted, but let and const variable declared are not hoisted. This is what the example of a block scope variable. Let and const will work in the case of block scope variable, but var will not work. That is just because of the hoisted. Another point is like in JavaScript, object and functions are also variables. Now what it means? So what we just saw, we saw the scope, and the scope are working in the case of variable only. But in JavaScript, object and functions are also variable. So to understand the function scope, you can watch my previous video, which is about the hosting. So I hope you understand, and this is it for this video guys. We will meet again with another JavaScript interview question. Till then, bye.